If you were passed over for a promotion despite doing great work, having strong work ethic, the issue might actually be your communication skills. And frankly, you weren't taught the communication skills that actually matter in the workplace in school. Schools focus on presentations and reports, but employers promote people who excel in communicating in meetings and conversations with clarity, with conviction. They promote people who know how to effectively read a room, who know how to navigate conflict, who also know how to build relationship through their words, through their communication. It is not your fault that you do not have these skills. However, it is your responsibility to close the gap. Here are 6 tiny changes that you can make to the language you use on a day-to-day, things you can immediately implement that will help you actually build out your executive presence and improve your communication. And by the way, executive presence is not just for executives. It is not just people who are at the top of the food chain. I've worked in consulting, tech, finance, so these tips and these small changes to your language are gonna be applicable across industries. Okay, let's jump into our notes. So when you're in a meeting and someone asks you a question, pause, take a beat, give yourself a moment. It'll help you gather your thoughts so you don't just start stumbling over your words as you have yourself experienced or seen other people experience, and it'll help minimize the filler words that you're using in that moment when you're responding. And regarding executive presence, a pause, it signals that you are confident. It signals that you're thoughtful and you're deliberate and you are in control of the words that are coming out of your mouth and the thoughts that you have. Rushing to fill silence can be read as you feel pressure to perform and you feel pressure to know what you're talking about rather than just being the person that knows what they're talking about. Next time you're in a meeting with an executive, take note of how they navigate questions that are directed at them. They are not shy about taking a pause if and when they feel the need to. And in fact, when they do that, it can command respect in the room. Okay, number 2, replace I think with I recommend, or just jump straight into whatever it is that you recommend. If you're speaking in a meeting and you're sharing your thoughts, the room already knows that those are your thoughts because they're coming from you. It's an unnecessary contextualizer and actually undercuts your authority when you speak. When you instead say, I recommend, it positions you as a problem solver who actually offers solutions, not someone who's timidly offering their perspective on something. Yes, it's a subtle shift, but it strengthens how people actually perceive your contributions during a meeting and at work in general. 3, you must stop apologizing for taking up space. Phrases like sorry to interrupt, this might be a dumb question, but XYZ, or I just wanted to quickly add, all of those things are diminishing your credibility before you even make your point. You're apologizing for speaking up. I understand that sometimes you're using these phrases as just a transition phrase, but replace them with something that's stronger. For example, instead of saying sorry to interrupt, language that we use in the classroom during business school is building on that point. Building on that point, and then you add whatever your thought is. That's a much stronger place to insert yourself from, transition into your thought from. Additionally, instead of saying this might be dumb, but you can say, for clarification, we're planning on X, Y, and Z. You're just asking for clarification. A reminder, especially for those that grew up in you only speak when spoken to or highly authoritative households, you are not being rude, nor are you being a nuisance by speaking up and sharing your perspective during a meeting. And I know there's a lot to unlearn there, but you need to keep that in mind. That has to be something that you work on. You are quite literally doing your job by saying something at that table during that meeting. So own your seat at the table and make sure that you're not apologizing for taking up space. Number 4, nail down the headline first communication strategy. Do not bury the lead, especially when you're in conversations with people who have very little time, who are executives on your team, company, etc. Start with the conclusion up front and then provide the supporting details. So instead of going into a meeting and starting off with saying something like, so I was looking at the numbers and there were some trends, and after talking with the team, I think we should maybe consider shifting our strategy to, you've lost the room. You've lost it. Start with your conclusion up front. Start with, I recommend we shift our Q3 strategy. Here's why, are the supporting data, trends, and team input to support it. Executives don't have time for long-winded setups. Lead with the answer, then back it up. This positions you as a results-oriented person. Number 5, Use I notice instead of I feel when you're providing feedback or raising concerns. When you're providing feedback or raising concerns, it can be really tempting to just start defaulting to language like I feel, because it softens the message a little bit, right? It feels like a little bit less of a blow. However, saying something like I feel like this approach isn't working sounds subjective and maybe even a bit emotional, whereas I notice the data shows X, Y, and Z sounds analytical and it sounds credible, which are two things you need when you're building an executive presence. Facts and data are always going to be further prioritized over feelings in a corporate setting, so use language that reflects that. Ground your observation in evidence and it will bolster your executive presence. It just will. Number 6, and I've noticed that people have a hard time with this, but after you make a point, stop talking. Resist the urge to over-explain or justify or fill space with nervous chatter. Make your point clearly and concisely, and then stop. Give people space to process and respond. And this is a sidebar that we might talk about at another time, but especially when you're in the midst of a negotiation, say what needs to be said and then stop. Do not over-explain, because what you're signaling when you over-explain is that you know that what you said is unreasonable, so you're trying to hyper-justify it, and that never works in your favor. But again, we'll come back to that another time. Over-talking absolutely dilutes your message, and it signals insecurity in your message, frankly. And insecurity is, not exactly what you want to be giving when you're trying to develop an executive presence ultimately. And yes, this ties back to tip number 1 in that you don't need to immediately fill the silence. So again, number 6, after you make your point, stop talking. I know a lot of the time people talk about improving your communication, working on communication, but they don't give tactical, tangible tips. I wanted to give 6 tips and tangible things that you can implement this week immediately for yourself. So take note of these things. You will never improve unless you practice. Communication is a muscle, so let's start putting the reps in. Implement immediately and let me know how it goes. If you have any questions or other things that you're working through right now at work or communication in general, let me know in the comments. Bye.